Sicario is a modern masterclass in building suspense. The writing, direction, cinematography, and sound all work hand in hand to continuously up the pressure and keep the stakes high. Add to that incredible performances from Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, and Benicio del Toro, and you've got the makings of a classic cop drama that'll be worth revisiting for years to come. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this film. I'm Brennan for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Alright, so as always, we're going to begin with a brief non-spoiler review. This movie is absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen it yet, then you are definitely missing out. It's currently available to stream on Netflix, and I cannot recommend it enough. It absolutely exceeded my expectations. I'm a big fan of Denis Villeneuve, so I expected that I was going to enjoy this movie going in, but I did not expect to like it so much. Now, obviously, this is not exactly a hot take. This is a fairly popular film, but this seemed to me from the outset to be one of those movies that I would walk away from thinking it was overrated, and I was certainly proved wrong here. It is incredibly fun. The story is super interesting. It's very nuanced and full of depth, and it's very, very fun to see. Additionally, I really enjoy the lens through which we view the story. It's certainly not what you would expect given the title, but I think it works really well. And that's a testament to the incredible writing of Taylor Sheridan and the direction of Denis here. It's absolutely amazing. I mentioned in the end of previous videos that the main reason I was excited for this was to see the cinematography of Roger Deakins, and he did not disappoint. There's one specific scene that I'm going to call attention to later in the spoiler section, but it was just amazing throughout the entire film. Roger Deakins is so incredible. He does such a good job with the lighting and playing with the lighting and getting you to feel emotions just based off of what is available on the screen. And it's just so incredibly well done. Using the camera to put you in the mind through the eyes of these different characters is incredibly fascinating. It will never not be interesting to me to see a film from Roger Deakins. And this definitely lived up to the hype. So I would definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. Like I said, it's currently available on Netflix. Now, before we get into the spoiler section, let's hear what Shade thought. Now, Shade says, Sicario is a thrilling and action-packed piece of art. To start off, the cinematography was beautifully done, and I mainly love how the colors of the desert and the lighting mix with the shots. Two of my favorite things about this movie are the fact that we get Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin, two actors I love, and I feel as if they did not lack in acting for this film. Which leads me to my next point on how amazing Emily Blunt was in this movie. She sure can play an action hero like a boss. Something that I don't talk about much is music scores, and I don't know why, but the music score really caught my attention, especially during the dinner scene at the end. All in all, I love this movie, and I have for a long time, and I simply can't think of that many negatives. Now, let's get on to the spoiler section. Okay, so now that we're in the spoiler section, the very first thing that I want to talk about is something that I alluded to in my non-spoiler review. I want to bring to light the lens through which we view this story, right? The film is called Sicario, and in the outset, in the opening scrawl, we learn that Sicario in Mexico means hitman. It is Spanish for hitman. And so given that, and given the composition of the poster, and given the sort of description here, you expect that this story is going to be seen through the eyes of the Sicario, of the hitman, who we learn is Benicio del Toro. But that's not how we view the story. We actually see the movie through the eyes of Emily Blunt's character, whose name is Kate Macer, and she is an FBI agent who is working on mostly she works to assist in kidnapping cases. She works hand in hand with SWAT in Arizona, and she is recruited by this DOD advisor, aka CIA agent, who's played by Josh Brolin. And through Josh Brolin, through Benicio del Toro, Kate Macer is introduced to this completely different world that is completely devoid from everything that she has experienced. She has spent her life fighting crime in the US of A, in the United States of America, in a highly modernized, quote unquote, civilized, advanced country. And now she is brought over into Mexico to deal with the cartels. All right. And the cartels are an extremely different beast. It is a completely different organization from what normally operates within the United States. And it is a culture shock to Kate. And it's a culture shock to us, right? It's something that the average American does not see, understand, or experience in everyday life. Thank the Lord for that, because it is truly, truly horrific. Now, obviously, in this, it is dramatized, right? It is a film, it's a fictional narrative, but it does take cues from actual goings on in cartel organizations and the actual events that happen in Mexico. For example, in their last election, wherein they elected Scheinbaum is her name. I can't remember her first name. Not important. In that election, which took place like 2023 and 2024, there were upwards of 30 political assassinations. 30 candidates and attached political figures were assassinated by the cartels, right? That is not something that we experience in the United States. Again, thank the Lord, right? So it's a massive culture shock. And seeing this through Kate Macer's eyes is such an incredible way to introduce this to us, right? It cements this as something that is, again, it's a fictionalized story, but seeing it through Kate's eyes makes it real. It makes it feel real, like this is something that is happening or could have happened or has happened multiple times, right? It's the type of thing where seeing it through the lens of somebody who is completely unawares of the situation, you're in the same boat as she is. You're in the same boat, right? Whereas if we had just seen this through the lens of Benicio del Toro, through the lens of Josh Brolin, it would not have hit the same way. It would not have done as good a job explaining the story here. It's really, really fascinating. I think it's so well written. And there is a line that Benicio del Toro says that perfectly epitomizes the entire theme of the movie. It is the entire point. It is exactly what the director and the writer are trying to get across from this movie. There's a line where Del Toro is talking to Emily Blunt and he says something like, "What you see will not make sense to your American eyes. You know, you won't be able to comprehend it, but by the end, you will understand." Right? That's the entire theme of the movie summed up in one sentence here. You know, whether or not you understand is a completely different question. Whether or not you support or oppose is a completely different question. But it sums up everything right there. This is different from your world. Not everywhere is the United States. Not everywhere is as blessed as we are to live in this country, right? Not everything is as peaceful as your average everyday life is. And it's so fascinating, right? Because again, we come into this. We're in the car with Kate Macer when she first sees the doings of the cartel, of which I will not describe here because they are somewhat graphic, but we are in the same boat as her. We do not understand. We do not see. This is not the world that we live in. But in the end, after seeing all of the chaos, all of the destruction that is wrought by these cartels, again, whether or not you support it or oppose it is obviously open to personal interpretation. I would argue that I'm largely opposed to the actions that Josh Brolin takes here. But you understand why you think that decision has to be made. You understand why this action is taken, even if you disagree with it. You see logically how a person could get here. And it's just so incredibly well written. I think it's just amazing. And the other thing that we sort of get from this movie, seeing it through the eyes of Kate Macer, is we get to see like the FBI as people and not as gods, right? Like, this is not your typical, how do I describe this? Like, say, Cold War propaganda CIA movie from like the 80s or the 60s, right? These agents, these operatives, they are not gods. They are not heroes. They are people trying to live and do their jobs, right? Like, very early on in the beginning of the film, we see what's the actor's name? Daniel Kaluuya. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he plays Kate Macer's partner, Reggie Wayne. We see them come across these, how do I put this delicately? We see them come across corpses that have been hidden inside of walls, right? And after we see that, we get a shot of Kate Macer and of Reggie Watt standing outside vomiting, right? Horrified by what they've seen, right? These are not hardened people. These are not people who have been doing this for 30, 40 years. These are not people who are, again, as I mentioned, they are not gods, right? They are human. And because of that, they have human reactions to things which are revolting and disturbing. Seeing 50 corpses boarded up in the walls is arguably revolting and disturbing, right? And so seeing these characters have this natural reaction, again, solidifies the realism of this story, right? Again, it puts you in the shoes of Kate Macer. It makes you understand what happens after this and why she does all of the things that she does, right? Because she does have a part in this story, although at the time it is unbeknownst to her. You understand her reasoning. And then furthermore, when Reggie and Kate start to feel, let's say, disenfranchised by the lack of information sharing from Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro, you understand the anger that they feel. You understand everything that's going on. It is just written very, very well. I can't talk about that enough. I mean, this is the work of Taylor Sheridan, who, to be honest, I believe this is the first thing of his that I have seen. But this is the guy who is behind, like the popular Paramount shows of recent years, Lioness, Tulsa King, Yellowstone, Landman, 1923, 1883, Mayor of Kingstown, and so on. I think he's got a couple more here. I don't know if this is necessarily related, but there's 1944 here. Yes, third prequel series to Yellowstone. And then a title here that's 6666, which looks like it may also be at least tangentially attached. Founded when Comanche still ruled West Texas, no ranch in America is more steeped in history of the West than the 6666. I would imagine that is at least tangentially related within the same universe here. But in any case, this is the first thing of his that I have seen. But I've heard nothing but good things about the works of Taylor Sheridan. I mean, obviously, my parents and grandparents are big fans of all of his Paramount work. And so after seeing this, I am a little bit more interested in seeing those shows, though I must admit they are nonetheless still towards the bottom of my they're towards the bottom of the list of things which I would like to watch relatively soon. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to them. But to be honest with you guys, I'm just not that I'm not that big of a TV guy. I'm not as big a TV guy as I used to be. I still enjoy TV, don't get me wrong. I still watch shows occasionally, but I'm definitely more of a film guy now. I think it's a very different style of storytelling, and I'm obviously not going to say that one is better than the other, though I would say undeniably there are more great movies than there are great TV shows, but that's besides the point. Not to ignite a conflict here, but let me know down in the comments if you're more of a movie or a TV guy. I don't know. But in any case, let's get back to Sicario. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that there was a specific scene that I wanted to call to light here due to the cinematography of Roger Deakins. And this is really one of the situations where it solidifies for me the fact that this is a modern masterclass in suspense building. I'm going to use that phrase again. And this is the scene. It's relatively early on. I want to say this is after the first act. So I want to say we're probably about 40 minutes into the movie here. Emily Blunt has just agreed and signed on to work with Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro. And the scene begins with them in, like a briefing room, understanding the operation, what's going on. They're going to grab a gentleman by the name, I think it's Guillermo, and they are taking him from a courthouse in Mexico, and they are going to bring him back across the border. The specific part that really interests me is when they get to the border crossing. It's when they get there, right? And so we see some shots of them driving in the car. In the car is Emily Blunt and Benicio del Toro. Josh Brolin is in a different vehicle. And we get this overhead drone view of the border crossing. And there's this narration over it, a voiceover, that's the word I was looking for, of the operator discussing what's going on. He's saying there is a car that broke down earlier along the way, and they are working to get it out. And given all of the information that we've heard up until this point with regards to this briefing and actually in transit, we know that the most likely place for our heroes, our agents, to be accosted by the cartel is at the border crossing itself. And so we get this overhead view, and it starts off, it's moving relatively slow. It's like a drone shot pointed straight down at the interstate, I guess, the roadway, the highway, perhaps. I don't know what the proper term would be here, but the border crossing, the road on which people cross the border. And it starts off moving relatively slow, but then the further along it gets away from the border crossing, the faster it speeds up, and the more and more cars we see stuck in this backlog. And so it's building the suspense from that very moment. You see there are thousands of cars. We know that this is the most likely spot for an attack from the cartel, and there are thousands of possibilities here. Thousands is probably an exaggeration. There's hundreds. There are a multitude of cars that could house criminal cartel members here. And then after this, we cut back to the inside of the vehicle. They are stopped on the street and they are waiting. And we get a close-up of Emily Blunt, Kate Macer, and she looks out the window. And then the camera, cuts to just observing the road. And it is this relatively wide shot. It's just sort of sweeping. It's just observing what's going on. And then we cut to, I believe it's to Benicio del Toro. We see his face. And then he turns and looks out the window. And when the camera cuts back outside, it's a much closer shot. It's much more intimate. He's looking for specific things. He's done this before. He knows what's happening. Emily Blunt, this is her first time. She doesn't know what to look for, so she's just scanning everything. But Benicio del Toro knows what he's looking for, so he's looking at specific cars. He's looking inside specific vehicles. It's so well done. Again, it puts you in the mindset of, okay, look, Kate Macer doesn't know what's up. And even if you don't consciously recognize it, you're thinking it. You're subconsciously thinking, okay, well, this is just a street, what's going on? And then we cut to Benicio del Toro and boom, we see the cartel members. We see them in the car, they're sweating, we see a gun. And it's so incredibly, incredibly well done here. I think it's just amazing. The scene was so well done. I mean, again, like I mentioned before, Roger Deakins is like cinematography royalty, and not just because he's British. But it's so amazing. I mean, there's so many good scenes here that it was difficult to pick just one that I wanted to talk about, because I could legitimately sit here for the next 50, 60 minutes talking about nothing other than the camera work of Roger Deakins. I legitimately could. That's how many good shots there are in this movie. I mean, some of the other ones, just to briefly mention them, we see shots in there's night vision and infrared. We see a scene where the sun is going down and the soldiers are just marching off into the desert. This is right towards the end when they are making their final push into the cartel stronghold. And they are completely covered by shadow. And so there's this incredibly high contrast of the silhouettes of these soldiers against the orange and red sky. It's just amazing. I could legitimately go on. I had a few more examples, but we should probably move on to talking about something else. And so the next thing that I want to discuss about this movie is the function of the CIA here, the function of Josh Brolin's character. Again, the story is formulated in such a way that you understand Kate Macer's view, you understand, what's Josh Brolin's name? Matt Graver's view, you understand, what's Benicio del Toro's view? I'm doing terrible with names right now. You understand Alejandro's view, right? And so the reason that Josh Brolin brings Emily Blunt along this mission is because he needs somebody from a domestic agency to be on the books for this. So that is a quote unquote sanctioned operation. Sorry, I just realized that I had the Doctor Doom book here. That's a little preview as to what we're going to be discussing Thursday. I didn't realize that was there. That's my bad. But in any case, nonetheless, it's just set dressing. We're not going to cut. We're not going to redo this because it's fine. Nobody cares. Check that video out on Thursday. But we see, man, I really lost my train of thought there. So the reason that Emily Blunt's here is because they need a domestic agent, somebody from, a domestic law enforcement agency such as the FBI to be involved with this so that the CIA can operate, so that they are legally allowed to operate. And of course, this isn't information that they tell them. This isn't information that they tell Kate Mercer until the very, very end, right? But this is something that we sort of get the semblance of relatively early on, right? So there's a scene where Kate Mercer is discussing this with her boss, who's played by a gentleman who is in Legends of Tomorrow and The Flash. Victor Garber, he is the Professor Stein half of Firestorm in that. And he's telling her, look, I don't have the authority to do this. I don't have the authority to send agents to Mexico. I don't have the authority to send you to an Air Force base and to fly on planes. This is coming from up high. This is coming from above my head, right? And so we get that sense really, really early on. But mostly, I love the way that Denis portrays Matt Graves in this. I love the way he portrays the CIA agent, right? What do they say? He's an agent of chaos. He's here to stir up the pot. He's here to dismantle things so that a friendly regime can take over. He's here so that there can be some semblance of order. And this is something that we know the CIA has done in the past. Absolutely, unequivocally, this is not disputable. This is not something that can be argued against. This is objective historical fact that the CIA has operated, outside of the United States, organizing regime change, right? We know for a fact that they've done that in the past. I see no reason to assume why they're not doing that now, but that's besides the point. In any case, we know for a fact that they have done this. And we know historically that the CIA has worked with the Colombian cartels. We know this, again, indisputably. And so to see it in this modern context is really amazing, especially because it's one of those things, again, from the average American sees this from the same view as Kate Mercer. Like, this is something that is not normal. The CIA operating in this way is not normal. This is not what they do. This is not what they are supposed to do, right? But Alejandro says, your American eyes do not know. Your American eyes will find it difficult to comprehend, but by the end, you will understand. It is incredibly interesting, and it's such an interesting view of like American foreign policy, right? For the past, I don't even know, when was the OSS created? Sometime, I want to say after World War II. My gut instinct is like the 1950s, so we're looking at 70 years now. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, it's really, really incredibly well done. And again, this is not the type of story that you would have seen. The movie came out 10 years ago. So this is not the type of movie that you would have seen 20 years ago. Like, this is not what you would have seen in the 1980s. I mean, what's a good example? I'm not going to be able to think of one. I'm not going to be able to think of one off the top of my head. But this is it's very nuanced. But in many ways, it's a very negative view of American foreign policy, and in a way that you don't necessarily see as often, right? I feel like in some ways today, it would be taboo to make a story like this. Obviously, it can be done, and it probably is being done and has been done recently. But I feel like in this period of time, 10 years ago, it was much more acceptable to be, what's the word I'm looking for? To be critical. It's not the word I was looking for, but it works. To be critical of the CIA, of the intelligence operations, right? For a long time, it was completely taboo. And then for a short period, it was like, we're okay talking about this because there were things that were coming out. There was private operations that were being revealed. And now I feel like we're sort of slipping back into a time where it's like a little bit more taboo. Like, you can still talk about it in some ways. There are still some ways that you can be critical in Hollywood, in culture. But I feel like generally speaking, since I would say 2018, 2019, there's really been a much less significant push against the intel agencies. And I think that's one of the reasons that I like this movie. Obviously, I am, sort of, I'm not gonna go down that road. But in any case, I think it's an incredibly well done movie. I think it's very, very interesting, and it's such a, like I say, it's a very good nuanced view of this, right? It is not it is not just hammering on Intel. It is not just in favor of Intel. It is a nuanced take. Like Alejandro says, at the end, you will understand. Again, whether you like it or dislike it, you understand the reasons that Alejandro is doing the things that he's doing. You understand the reasons why Matt Graves is doing what he's doing. You understand why this would be a sanctioned operation from the government, right? It's incredibly, incredibly well told. And again, I think it's absolutely 100% worth the watch. I think you should watch it and, come to your own conclusions, right? Come to your own conclusions, whether or not you think the actions of Josh Brolin are legitimate and proper, let's say, if those are the right things to do, or if you come on the side of Kate Mercer, the person who towards the end is like, I'm going to expose this. I'm not going to stay quiet here. Although events transpire that I believe, force her to reconsider that. But in any case, come to your own conclusions. Like I said, it's incredibly nuanced. I do think there is something in here for everybody, right? Like, this is a good movie to watch, whether you are anti-establishmentarian anarchist or if you are a neocon, right? Or a neo-lib who's in favor of the MIC, whatever. It's a great all-around film. And it has done nothing but improve my view of Denis Villeneuve, who I was already a huge fan of based off his work from Dune. Now, this movie is obviously not anywhere near the level of those two movies. And though I haven't seen it yet, from what I've heard, it is not near the level of, say, Blade Runner 2049. But it is incredibly, incredibly well made. It's on Netflix now. Give it a watch if you haven't yet. Let me know down below what you guys thought of it. Let me know on any of the other things that we discussed in this video. And let's see, Thursday, if you remember, we're going to be discussing One World Under Doom. It's the major status quo changing event of the Marvel Universe. And we will be back here next Tuesday to review the final installment in Tom Hardy's Venom trilogy, Venom: The Last Dance. And until then, I will see you guys on Thursday.